Okay, so as I was talking to people today, just looking at your responses in GoFormative, I could see there's still some gaps, like in our understanding on what we're being asked to do in um, something like you know uh, write a function which calculates the total of this list of values, sort of thing. Um, so at this point in the course, we really want to understand this sort of thing. So I'm glad that I can see that we need to address this, and it really is something that we can kind of fix. I think if we just kind of pay attention to a few points here. So first of all, if I'm asking you to write a function, and wait, hold on one second. Let me see. So I'm asking you to write a function named length_scores. It takes a list of integers as a parameter and returns the length of the list, right? So first of all, we're going to write a function that's called length_scores. Like, how do we do that, right? How do you do that, right? And hopefully everybody knows to write a function, I have to use keyword def, and then I can give the function name, which is length_scores. It takes a parameter, which is a list of integers. So that thing needs to go inside the parentheses. Your list of integers needs to go here. Now, you could call this list O integers. You call it whatever you want. What are we trying to do with our variable names? We're trying to make them reflect, um, the values that they represent. We're trying to make them relatively short, so we don't have to type out super long things. So list of integers is perhaps a little long in the tooth, if you will. Be careful of using lists. A lot of people use lists, right? I know list is not something I want to use because when I use it, it shows up as purple, right? Purples are key reserved type words. Now, if you really wanted to say like a general, like list or arrays are kind of similar, same thing, you could just say ARR. Is that turning purple? I don't think it is. Does array turn purple? No, that doesn't turn purple either. But I think we could do better than that. I think we could say something like score or even values. I think values is a pretty good one because this list is going to hold a bunch of values, right? Now, to be honest, I think that everyone should be aware of the length function, and I really don't have a problem with you using the length function right there. Boom, that's going to return the length of the function. Okay. Now, okay, I'll come back to this in one sec. I'll come back to it in 1 second. Now, I got the second one is to write a function called total score. So again, we shall be able to do this. It's going to hold a list of values or integers. And so I go like this. So this one, I asked you to use the accumulator algorithm that Runestone has shown. Runestone has shown this algorithm many times, and you should have come across this many times in your coding about type of problem, something similar. We need to create a variable. We need to iterate through an object, and then we need to add on to that variable that we originally created. Well, the variable that we're creating represents the total value that we see in the list, right? So what's a good variable name? I think total is a good variable name. So all kinds of different things going on here. Now, you could use the range function, but I think that's causing confusion. So I'm just going to say like for blank in blank, right? For blank 1 and blank 2. Now let me say this. The way Python allows you to iterate directly over iterable objects, okay, is you use the keyword for, you then have to pick a variable name, and then you say in whatever iterable object it is that you want to iterate over, okay? Well, this is where we're going to put our iterable object. What is an iterable object? Well, strings are iterable objects. Lists are iterable objects. Tuples are iterable objects. Blah, blah, blah. There's different types. But for us, it's really strings and lists. That's all we got, strings and lists. So do I have a string or list that I want to iterate over? Yes, I do. It's that list called values, right? So that's what's going to go in there is values, right? Now here I get to choose a variable name, right? A variable name. A lot of people said for I in values, and I really don't like it. I do not like it. I don't like it. I is the variable name that we want to use with the range function. Okay, so I don't like confusing it here in this idea. And then I see people trying to index the values, and that's not cool either. Hopefully, by the way, you understand that values really, could be something that looks like this, right? So value could be, that's what values could be. It's a list of integers, right? So, right now I'm saying, values here or values here. I mean, it could just be a list of integers. I will take on each one of those values, right? So if I say total plus, or as a plus equals, but total equals total plus I, right? That's going to like build up the total as you go through the for loop, right? Does that make sense? Now, again, I don't like I, so what do I like? Well, I think num is a better variable choice, right? Or num. I could write for integer or something, you know, but the classic Pythonic construction would be for value in values, or value in values, because value is the singular of the plural values, right? The one of the many. So as you go through it, value is going to take on each one of the values in those values. And so you're going to go total equals total plus value, okay? So now there's perhaps a different way you could do this. But a couple things I just want to say at this point, and that is both of these functions return things, right? So at some point, if you wanted to kind of test these functions, you know, and you say, oh, I have this list, I'm going to call this list X, and I go, let me see if total scores does what I think it's going to do. I put X in there because X is my list, so hopefully that makes sense. You know, and I run this thing. Unexpected. Yeah, why are you ending? And so I run this thing, and you don't get anything. It's like, well, why don't I get anything? You know, first of all, you know, is there a problem with those functions? You know, functions aren't showing us anything. Functions don't have to show us anything, right? And your responses to these things didn't ask you to test it or show me what was going on. So, you know, it's not like, by the way, it kind of looks like nothing's happening. Well, guess what? Something is happening. That function is being called, and a value is being generated right here, right there, right? And if you want to see what that value is, you could print out the value that's sort of like occurring or appearing at that moment. And there you get to see it, right? So functions that return things, if you want to see what they return, one way to do that is to print it out. A lot of times we'll simply store it in a variable to use later. Okay, so now I'm asking you to write a function called aveScores, which also takes a list of integers, right, called values. Then I'm asking you to use these two functions up above to you know, to return the average or something like that. So one way we could do this is we could say, okay, total, I'll store this in a variable, is going to be total scores, and I'll put that list in there. And then length is going to be length scores. And I know there, you know, you maybe said this is kind of extra. I could have done this way shorter. I could have, like, I don't need all this. Yeah, I know that's true. The whole idea with this is to sort of, you know, just introduce the concept. Just introduce this idea, you know, that, okay, I could write functions and then actually use the functions that I've written inside another function, right? And then at the end of the day, well, I know how to do average. I return the total divided by the number of values. So maybe length is num values or num scores or something, right? So how about that? How about that? How readable is that? Like, that's pretty readable. And if you, I mean, I understand how this is all working. I really don't even need the variable total here or the variable num values. I could just go like total scores divided by length scores, you know, and that would work as well. I saw someone do this. Can I show you this here? They actually used an accumulator pattern for something like this. Let's say for value and values. By the way, if you don't know how any of this stuff works, like, type this stuff out in the shell, right? Type this stuff out in the shell. And then that should work too. So, you know, the question is, well, wait a second. And someone asked this question earlier today. So I have the length scores that look like that, the total scores that look like this, and they're like, well, they're almost identical. Like, what's the difference? Like, like they look like they're the same thing, really, you know? Well, they're similar, very similar ideas, but there's a fundamental difference, and the fundamental difference is in length scores for each item in the list. You're adding one to count. What does that do? It keeps track of how many things there are, because each time you find something, you add one. So, oh, how many potatoes do I have? I have 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato, 4 potato, 5 potato, right? But in the second one, like if you're keeping track of the weight of the potato, then it's like, oh, I got like 35 grams, I got 40 grams, I got 52 grams, and I'm adding those values on. So then I'll get the total weight at the end of this process. Even though the algorithms are very similar, I'm incrementing by a different value, and that ends up, giving me a value which means something different in both of those algorithms. Now, finally, I just said, hey, use this list to test your code. And again, how could we do that? Well, we could come down here. We could call the function. And one way to do it, well, okay, how about this? Here's the way to do it. There's the list. And so now scores becomes the parameter, right, that I'm going to put in there. And I run this thing, and of course I don't see anything, but I told you that was the case. And so what we have to do is print out the call to this, right? And see what happens. Boom. Now I could, of course, go aveScores in here, right? And then throw this in here. Is this cool? Is this something I could do? Can I do that? Like, yeah, I could do that, right? Scores, the variable, is no different than that list of values, right? Because that list of values is essentially being referenced by scores once we initialize it like we did. And so that's kind of what you get. So anyways, I don't know if you're going to watch this. Obviously you probably don't need to watch this if this all made sense to you, but I could see many people were stuck, and I know a lot of people don't like to ask for help, in front of other people. So hopefully this is an opportunity for you to get some clarification. All right? Enjoy.